In the town of Kiwala, surrounded by mango trees and dry winds, lived the Nehru family, a proud household once known for its educated daughters and respected standing in the community. Among them, Arinu was a radiant star. Bright, ambitious, and fiercely independent, she had been the first in the family to earn a degree in education. She returned home to teach in the local school, where she became known not just for her lessons, but for the way she made her students feel seen and capable. Ari walked through life with her head high. She was a single mother by choice, not through recklessness but through courage. When the father of her unborn child disappeared upon learning of the pregnancy, Ari chose not to beg or hide. Instead, she stood before her family and her town and said, "I will raise this child with love, even if I must do it alone." Some gossiped, others admired her, but none could deny her strength. She continued teaching through her pregnancy, her steps slower but her spirit unchanged. She had planned everything: a crib beside her bed, a lullaby she'd written in her journal, a name picked from her favorite novel. She was ready, but fate can be cruel. Ari died unexpectedly during childbirth, her heart giving out, moments after her daughter was born. She left behind not just a baby, but a silence so deep it swallowed the dreams she had planted. And in that silence, within the walls of the Nehru home, something bitter began to grow, where love should have taken root. The child was named Mara. She had her mother's eyes and carried the silence of loss before she could even speak. Ariane's elder sister, Modina, and her husband Zaka took Mara in. They already had 3 children, bright, loud, and spoiled, and they lived in a large compound at the edge of Kiwala town. The family had once promised to raise Mara as their own, to honor Ari's memory. But promises are easy when grief is fresh. Time, however, tests sincerity. By the time Mara was 7, she knew her place in the household. She was not a daughter. She was not a niece. She was the help. They didn't call her that outright, but everything in their tone, in their actions, spelled it. While her cousins went to a private academy, Mara walked to the public school barefoot. When they wore polished shoes and pressed uniforms, she wore hand-me-downs and shirts too big for her small frame. And when they returned to homework and cartoons, Mara cleaned the compound, washed the dishes, washed and ironed their uniforms. Modina, once a smiling aunt, became sharp and dismissive. "Eat in the kitchen," she'd say. "You're not part of this table." Zaka wasn't cruel, but he was complicit in his silence. She cried into her thin pillow, muffling the sound so her cousins wouldn't hear and mock her. In the darkness, where no one could see her trembling, she often asked questions only the silence could answer. What did I do wrong? Why did my mother have to die? Why was I born just to be unwanted? She prayed, not always for escape, but for clarity, for love, for someone to say her name with kindness, not as an insult. She ached for the feeling of being chosen, of being protected, and more than anything, she longed to hear someone say, "You matter." But the house only echoed commands and criticism. So Mara clung to her books and her faith like life rafts. They were the only things that didn't treat her like a mistake. She had only one escape: books. Mara devoured old novels, hidden beneath her bed, borrowed from the school library. She read about girls who built machines, women who led kingdoms, and orphans who found families that chose them. She believed somehow that she was more than what Modina made her feel. When she turned 15, she overheard a conversation that changed everything. Modina was speaking to a neighbor. "She's a burden. We feed her, clothe her, and for what? She's not even grateful. If her mother had lived, she'd still be nothing. Some girls are just born to suffer." Mara didn't cry that night. She made a decision. While her cousins spent evenings watching television or scrolling through their phones, Mara stayed up late at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. She studied by candlelight or the dim hallway bulb, whispering equations and grammar rules to herself, like prayers. At school, she borrowed an old laptop that had been donated to the computer lab. It was slow and missing keys, but to Mara, it was gold. She taught herself typing, wrote essays, researched scholarship programs, anything that could help her build a future beyond that house. But when she took the laptop home over holidays to work on her county essay submission, she knew she had to be careful. Her aunt had once thrown out her only pair of school shoes in a fit of anger. If she saw the laptop, she might break it or throw it away, claiming Mara was wasting electricity or acting better than everyone else. So Mara hid it in a shoebox under her bed, wrapped in an old sweater. She only brought it out in secret, typing quietly under the blanket with her heart pounding at every sound. Her effort paid off. She won the county essay competition. The prize was small, just a certificate and a modest voucher, but the judges noticed her. One of them, a visiting teacher named Miss Chipo, stayed behind after the ceremony. She'd read Mara's essay 3 times, and something about the girl's quiet voice and too thin frame stirred her deeply. Miss Chipo pulled Mara aside and asked, "Who do you live with?" And when Mara answered, voice low, eyes cast down, murmuring about her aunt, the chores, the leftovers, the names they called her, Miss Chipo's face hardened, but her voice remained gentle. "I'd like to help you," she said. At first, Mara was afraid. Help had never come without a price, but Miss Chipo wasn't like the others. She didn't pity Mara in a way that felt belittling. She simply listened, then moved with quiet purpose. Within a week, Miss Chipo arranged for a visit to the home. On paper, it was to assess the home environment for a potential bursary. But really, it was to see for herself what Mara had left unsaid. The moment she stepped into the cramped house and saw how Mara's cousins laughed while she scrubbed the floor in a torn uniform, Miss Chipo made up her mind. She spoke with the school principal, called a social worker she knew personally, and filed the necessary reports. She then contacted a girls' empowerment foundation that offered boarding sponsorships for underprivileged girls with academic promise. Within a month, Mara's bags were packed. Miss Chipo came on a Sunday morning, accompanied by a counselor and a staff member from the foundation. Mara's aunt protested loudly, accusing them of stealing her house help, but legally she had no claim. Mara was 17, old enough to advocate for herself, and the documentation Miss Chipo had helped her prepare showed the years of neglect. Modena scoffed and bitterly told her, "Don't come running back when the world shows you who you really are." When Mara stepped into the clean dorm room at the boarding center, where she had her own bed, a desk and a shelf for books, she wept, not because she was sad, but because it was the first time in her life someone had chosen her, not out of obligation, but out of belief. Miss Chipo didn't just rescue Mara, she mentored her. She visited often, brought her books, helped her apply for scholarships, and taught her how to speak with confidence. Under her guidance, Mara thrived. She went on to graduate top of her class, earned a full university scholarship to study communications, and later became a published writer and youth speaker, telling her story not with bitterness, but with fierce grace. And through it all, Miss Chipo remained in her life, not as a savior, but as the one who first reminded her, "You are not what they said you were." With Miss Chipo's help, Mara applied for a scholarship abroad. It wasn't easy. She had to gather recommendation letters and write essays late into the night. But with determination and Miss Chipo's guidance, Mara was accepted into a university in Canada to study community development and social policy. The day she boarded the plane to Canada, she carried nothing but dreams and hope in her heart. Life abroad wasn't always smooth. She worked part-time jobs and sometimes cried from exhaustion. But for the first time, she belonged somewhere. She had friends who called her brilliant, professors who believed in her voice, and communities that listened when she spoke. She graduated with honors, but Mara never planned to stay away forever. When she returned home 4 years later, it wasn't just with a degree. She came back with a plan to become the woman she had needed as a child. She started small: community dialogues, mentorship sessions in local schools, and a small reading room named after her mother. Then came the foundation. Then came national awards. Then came the headlines. Mara had left as a girl carrying wounds. She came back as a woman building doors where others saw walls. Mara's name began to appear in newspapers and online platforms. She spoke at conferences about resilience, wrote essays that stirred conversations on child neglect, and launched a foundation in her 20s to support girls like her, those unseen, unheard, and unloved in their own homes. She never used her story for sympathy. When asked, she simply said, "I grew up in a house that didn't want me, but the world made space." Her foundation, The Light Within, sponsored dozens of girls through high school and university. One day, while hosting a mentorship event in her home county, Mara saw a familiar figure waiting in the reception area of the venue. Her heart dipped. It was her aunt. Aging now, thinner, dressed in a once expensive blouse that had lost its shape. With her were her 2 daughters, Mara's cousins, though she no longer felt that word fit. One of them held a baby on her hip. The other shifted uncomfortably, eyes avoiding Mara's. Mara kept her expression still. Her aunt rose and said, "Mara, my daughter, it's good to see you doing so well. Things have been hard for us. Your uncle passed last year. The shop went under. Your cousins haven't been able to find jobs." She gave a small, pitiful laugh. "We were hoping you could help." Mara blinked slowly. So now they remembered her. Now she was useful. For a brief moment, Mara thought of the years, scrubbing floors with raw hands, crying quietly into her pillow, being called useless, burden, witch's child. She remembered the night they locked her out in the rain for forgetting her place. She remembered the hunger. Then she remembered Miss Cheapo. She remembered the library card pressed into her hand, the laptop hidden in her school locker, the first night she slept in her own bed at the girls' centre, the first time someone clapped just for her. She met her aunt's eyes. "I'm sorry things have been difficult," she said calmly, "but I'm not in a position to offer personal support." Her aunt's eyes widened. "But you have money now. You run a foundation." "Yes," Mara replied, "a foundation for girls who were once in my position, girls who were mistreated by the very people who should have loved them." She stood taller. "I use my resources where healing is possible." The silence that followed was thick. Her cousins looked away. Her aunt swallowed hard, humiliated. But Mara didn't soften, not this time. She signaled for her assistant to escort them out, politely, with dignity, because despite everything, Mara would never become like them. That evening, she sat on her balcony, watching the sky dim into gold. Miss Cheapo called, as she often did. "I heard the event was a success," she said. "It was," Mara replied. "A full room, good questions, and a lesson in boundaries." Miss Cheapo chuckled knowingly. "You're proud of me?" Mara asked, half teasing. "I've always been," came the answer. "From the moment you chose kindness over bitterness. That's power." Mara smiled and looked out at the horizon. She had once begged for someone to call her by her name with love. Now the world knew it, and she wore it like a crown. Mara, the one who rose. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more stories.